visuals on top. Oh no,
we're live now.
We are. Everybody. I mean, we've been talking for like 25 minutes. I just wish we'd hit the record button earlier.
That's the point of the show. Hey, everybody. It is, we usually do this at 11. I had a meeting, so it's 11:09, and we are live on Facebook. Today, wow, how do we get this guy? I'm excited. Joseph Jaffe is on the show. Let me put this up. Joe is... someone I admire a great deal. So I'm going to read the actual bio. Joseph Jaffe is an author, keynote speaker, consultant, and as of the global pandemic, the host of the hugely influential and popular Corona.TV.show, a daily show focused on hope, positivity, and a little bit of marketing. I was fortunate enough to be on the show, so I can attest to the fact that it is all about hope. Because I'm like a ray of hope, and so Joe, thank you so much for being on the show today.
And you're adorable.
Thank you. I agree. Hey, as I mentioned, you were kind enough to have me on your show, and when you had me on the show, I was going to pull the video, but I'm gonna go old school, low tech. You said that I was one of the most underrated thinkers, underappreciated minds in the whole world. Maybe to start, could we just start there, please?
Sure, because Saul, this show is all about you.
Just the first part.
Do you like my background, by the way?
I do.
See, Saul is my head. Well, I think that there are a couple of things about you that I really like, really love. In fact, one is I do think you have original thought, original thinking, and an original perspective. From Saul is, right, from your website to this idea that I really loved, which is the concept of a podcast, of joining it in the middle, like in the middle of a conversation, as opposed to the setup, to what you did at South by Southwest. And then the other thing about you is I feel you do go to places maybe that other people might not go to. And there's almost like this fear, like, I hope he doesn't go too far, and you teeter on the edge, but you don't really fall off. And I think you say some brave things, and things that have stuck with me, like the whole idea of McDonald's, donating, instead of turning their M into a W on Women's Day, donating $2 million to Planned Parenthood. And one of the things that's come out of this whole global pandemic, you and I are fellow streamies, all of these people creating content, is it's really hard to create something that is different and unique. And I think the real battle for us is to come with a unique perspective and a point of view. That's our challenge. So the way I look at things is, am I going to deliver? In fact, that is my goal always. Can I deliver something that no one else has said? So, for example, when talking about the whole TikTok mobilization in terms of buying, fake tickets or buying tickets to the Donald Trump rally, the perspective that I brought there, which nobody brought, I don't believe, was this idea that we actually were seeing a non-voting base, teenagers, demonstrating their power, their clout, their say, and saying, if our grandparents, i.e. Congress, can't get the job done, we will. And so similarly, maybe that's what it is, or which is, I see a similarity between us, which is the ability to pursue that truth, even if it's an inconvenient one.
So I agree, and that's one of the things that's drawn me to you for many years. Is you? It's a combination of having a really interesting insight and not being afraid to say it, because there's a lot of people who have interesting insights, and they say, "Oh, I could never say that," and I've always appreciated about you. So I've got a bunch of real questions to ask you, and fancy questions. But before we go there, I want to talk just a little bit about the Corona TV. And so you do this every day, and you're prolific about it, and you've been able to line up some really amazing guests. And I'm going to assume that the the genesis of it is just that we're all at home, and you know, it's an amazing way to stay top of mind and things. But where did the idea for Corona TV come from?
And the real answer to that is I'm not sure. I don't actually remember the moment. And I think this is that is the lesson in of itself, the insight, which is sometimes you've just got to do it and allow it to evolve. So what happened was I came back from South Africa. I went to visit my mom. My mom is 4 years into battling, and I say battling, but dealing with cancer. And thank God, you know, she's been strong and amazing, you know, at her age. And so I've been trying to visit her 3 to 4 times a year if I'm able to. And I came back to finding, I see that just threw me off when I see Good Morning Handsomes. You talk about Saul, I guess. I came back to hearing that my wife had contracted the coronavirus, and I immediately self-quarantined. And then I don't know what the moment was. I was on a different floor in the house. I was staying in a different bedroom. Some people call that marriage, I suppose. But I was staying away from my wife, and I was there, and I just like, you know what? Let me go live on Facebook. And I don't remember why. I don't remember what the idea was. I certainly didn't have any idea that this was going to lead to a show. But one thing led to another, and from streaming live on Facebook to using Zoom to discovering the same platform that we're using, which is StreamYard, and I'm a huge evangelist and, you know, ambassador for them. I just love this piece of software. And then, you know, one day I was talking to my sister, and, you know, she has a cycling studio in London, and she was basically faced with closing it down. A spinning studio, closing it down, but she pivoted and she started streaming online as well. And so I said, well, why don't you just come on as my guest? You know, you're interesting, you're an entrepreneur, you're demonstrating resilience and grit. And one thing led to another, and suddenly the show moved to interview format. And now I've done, I think today is 60 or 61. And the thing is, you know, every day I try and do something different. Every day I try and get better. Every day I try and experiment, and it's just given me this purpose and this zest for life. And I have to tell you, the irony of it all is that this is a bucket list item for me. I've always wanted, you know, I joke and I say they told me I have a face for radio, ha ha ha, you know, because I mean, look at this handsome face. But this is a bucket list item for me. I've always wanted to create some kind of a television show, and now I'm doing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Like, I actually did a podcast a week or two ago where I was the guest, wasn't the host, and it was about the show's called Finding Favorites with Leah Jones, and the show is basically, she brings people on to describe where they found things that have inspired them throughout their life. And you can only pick one thing. And I said late night television, Letterman, Carson, all these things were so influential for me as a younger person, and introduced me to so many bands I'd never heard of and comedians I'd never seen. So the whole idea of having a show and doing interviews has always been something on the back of my mind. So I agree 100%. I'm curious though, you've branded yourself COVID TV. What
no, not COVID TV, Corona
TV. Yes.
You've just blown my chances of getting a sponsorship from AB InBev. Thanks.
I was going to say, what do you do when there's a vaccine? You turn into a beer brand. Okay, yeah. I got it. Hey, let's get into some.
No, but let's go back to what you were saying. So the idea, I'm actually quite endeared to Corona TV, and it has become a brand in of itself. But but the plan is to disrupt myself and change the name to Jaffe Juice TV, or back to Jaffe Juice TV, because I once did Jaffe Juice TV. So that's the plan. The goal right now is to do it around Labor Day. So I've kind of set a time, you know, like a milestone or a goal, and we'll see if I do it. But you know, some people had said, oh, you know, YouTube or Google block keywords that have Corona in it and whatever. But for me, it's become a way of finding lemonade from lemons. And but the plan is to change it at some point.
Your next name should be Corona TV Second Wave, and then go to Jaffe Juice. So you got,
see that's a Saul Colt statement if I've ever heard one.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about some stuff. You've written many books. I think you've written 5 books. Your most recent book is Built to Suck: The Inevitable Demise of the Corporation and How to Save It. I'm reading from the screen. Documents the prophetic reality of the demise of the corporate empire. I'm fascinated by, well, one, I'm fascinated by this book, but before we dive in too deep in the book, I'm fascinated by the art of authorship. So I'm going to pay you a compliment because I admire you a great deal. I've read, I think, 4 out of 5 of your books, and you always seem to be on the right side of history years later. Like, you sort of nailed, the life after the 30-second spot and things like that. Is this something you even worry about? Because I think sometimes you can just write a book, it lives for a year, and you ride on it, and then you move on to the next thing. But you've actually kind of nailed your topics pretty well.
So there is, thank you. One of the hardest things is learning how to take a compliment. So I'm trying to learn how to say the word thank you, which is the A of a deer in Flip the Funnel. There's a good and a bad. The bad part of it is I've always been a little too far ahead. And so what happens is, for example, when I wrote Join the Conversation 2007, this is before anybody in a Twitter account could get a book deal. And before the publishers got a little desperate, which is, oh, you've got 10,000 followers on Twitter, we'll give you a book deal because you can do the marketing and promote the book. You know, when I got my first book deal with Life After the 30-Second Spot, it was a deal. There, it was pitched. There was a proposal. There were rounds. I mean, I felt like it was a big deal, and it was a big deal. But one of the hardest parts, why I say that, is it's not sour grapes. It's the fact that suddenly everyone had a book on social media, and it swallowed up this idea of conversational marketing, because marketing is bigger than media. And conversational marketing sounded like something better than social media. But regardless, my North Star when I write books is I don't want the book to be out of date. I want it to be timeless. I want it to be classic. I want it to be something like permission marketing or tipping point. I want it to be something that can live and endure forever. And the way you do that is by letting strategy always guide you, because if you are true to yourself and you think from a strategic standpoint, and you can understand and see the way the world is moving, then it's very hard not to become, a book that is QR codes for dummies or whatever the case may be, and that has gone through waves in of itself. So the bad part of it is when you're too far ahead. You tend to be on the fringe, and then when it all hits, kind of everybody forgets you except for you, Saul. The good part of it is the fact that I know that I'm being true to myself, and I think in the case of Built to Suck, for the first time, this book has J.C. Penney and Sears on the cover. 1 year ago, talking about the demise of the corporation, and look, did COVID accelerate the demise on some levels? Yes, but just like COVID, or what is COVID doing? I get frustrated when I see people saying that COVID has ushered in digital transformation. No, it hasn't. All it's done is it's accelerated companies to try their best to catch up. That's all they're doing. They're just catching up. They're not transforming at all, number one. Number two, the demise of the corporation now, all that's happened there is an acceleration. These were companies that were on borrowed time, that were on life support. And so all that's happened is they've been exposed. And I don't get to talk about the book much these days because I'm so much focused on my show and other people's stories. But thank you for allowing me to get back to this, because I'm very passionate about it, because I'm not the harbinger of doom here. I'm not out to try and, told you so with respect to companies. I'm just recognizing that if the corporation were an empire or a civilization, like every single one before it, it too will not be able to cheat the sands of time.
Mm-hmm. Well, I want to talk. Well,
what was your question again? No.
Well, no, I'll re-ask it, but I want to go deep on the book because there's a lot of stuff that I'm really interested in. But so, sort of rephrasing the same question, looking back at the 30-second Life After the 30-Second Spot, your first book, it's still pretty relevant today, but not a lot of business books hold up. So I'm curious to know, like, what you think the shelf life of an average business book is versus what it should be, because it should be timeless. They should be evergreen. And I think a lot of the mistakes people make is that they talk too much about the tools and not about the theory, or in things like that. But why don't a lot of business books hold up? Is it just it's too much riding on a trend and it's not actual forward thinking, or do you have any sort of thoughts on this?
I have a few. I mean, I think one is alluding to what we discussed before, which is they're tactics in search of strategy, or they're just tactics by themselves. Mm-hmm. Number two is I feel that very, there's a parallel path, which is the demise of the publisher, and mm-hmm. and how Wiley published 4 of my 5 books. But whether it's Wiley or McGraw-Hill, these are entire industries and companies that are in decline. The old model their business model does not work as it used to. And mm-hmm. and I think what's happened is they've got increasingly desperate, where they'll get, before, as I said, they would have given a deal to anyone who had a Twitter account. Now mm-hmm. you can basically buy your deal. If you go there and you say, I'm going to buy 10,000 copies of a book, congratulations, you're an author. But more importantly, a lot of the advice that comes out of these publishers is it needs to be a handbook. It needs to be a how-to. It needs to be instructional. Well, I have no interest in those kinds of books because the reality is you don't need a book to learn how to be competent and capable in this world. You just have to roll up your sleeves and do it. And they're intelligent, resources like video on YouTube or streaming shows that will help you and help you get there. You don't actually need to buy a book. And so when you think about why it's happened and why these books don't hold up, they don't hold up because they are too focused on right here and right now, to use the quote, because you are a Canadian, as I've dubbed all my favorite people in the world, either from Boston or from Canada or both. Gretzky said he didn't skate to where the puck was, he skated to where the puck was going to be. And I think if you can write a book that can do that, and also just look a little further ahead and understand the direction that that everything is heading in, as opposed to where the wind is blowing at any given point in time, then you have a much better chance. I'll just add one more thing about Life After the 30-Second Spot. A lot of people would say to me, oh, you wrote Death of the 30-Second Spot. And then I would say, well, clearly you haven't read the book, because mm-hmm. that's not what the book is called. The book was not. The book says, and I remember this well, I said, in its existing form, and as a metaphor for a certain way of doing business, the 30-second spot is either dead, dying, or has outlived its usefulness. But the book was really about the 10 bold alternatives to traditional advertising. One of them I called consumer-generated content. YouTube didn't exist yet. One of them was called communal marketing. The term social media didn't exist yet. Facebook didn't exist yet. And one of them was called mobile. Well, the iPhone didn't exist yet. So even though I looked at 10 approaches, which could have been quite tactical in nature, there isn't one of those approaches, not one, that hasn't held up.
Mm-hmm. So, I would be remiss if I didn't at least ask you this question. You're the guy who talked about Life After 30-Second Spot. Where should people be advertising now? Obviously, everything evolves, tools change, platforms change. Where high level, I'm not. Every situation is different, and every budget is different. But where do you think the best places for people to at least be paying attention are?
Well, they should. Excuse me for stretching, but this was book number 4. And by the way, how do I even have a copy of my book available? And this is not untrue. I've been using them just to prop up my laptop, which by the way, I mean, I should show you, like, if I could try a different camera angle. I don't know how to do that yet. Oh, wait, I could do something kind of like crazy, which is just take my, hopefully this won't like, so I mean the laptop is basically on two Nike shoe boxes and propped up oftentimes by my Logitech, you know, with my green screen behind me. And so anyway, the point is, zero.
Wait, you mean you're in front of a green screen? You don't have a permanent poster of me behind you?
Yeah. No, I do. Sorry. That was an amateurish statement. I do. In fact, I sleep in Saul is awesome pajamas.
I approve.
So I'm sure you do. No, but I mean, zero paid media as the new marketing model. And I say this, you know, and whether you love him or hate him, you know, Donald Trump is the quintessential case study for zero. Zealots, entrepreneurship, retention, and owned assets. And as I said in zero, you know, in a perfect world, the optimal paid media budget would be zero, right? Because, and the vision behind zero is to move from being a tenant, renting media, fleeting, you know, where your landlord is often a slumlord, you know, some of the big players out there today, like the Facebooks of the world, to being a landlord. And what is a landlord? A landlord is when you own and monetize your own assets. So I say start with your content and your video and your customer service and your data and your websites and your clothing and your, you know, your vans and your storefronts. And then you can start to figure out you know, I came up with the acronym PEON, right? Which is all my acronyms are meant to be like somewhat ironic, which is paid, earned, owned, and non-media. So why do we always have to start with paid media? Let's end there if there's time and money and budget and, you know, inclination left over. I do not believe that you need to be anywhere these days. I believe that if you actually have a great product surrounded by great service and great people and great community, it should take care of itself if you let go of those, you know, control reins and allow ideas to flourish and spread.
So I agree 1000%. I preach something very similar, but you know, and not but I'm just going to say the blowback I get when I preach this is that it's hard, and of course it's hard, but a lot of brands don't want hard. So how do you sell this through to a brand that's looking at like, what, we need to do work here?
Well, let's, you know, to quote a great and a very smart guy, Saul Colt. I always like to when I'm listening to you on the Beancast, and I can almost pinpoint exactly where I am on my 4-mile run. And you guys were actually talking about messaging coming out of, you know, the current, you know, Black Lives Matter movement. And I think it was you, I'm pretty sure it was you that said, look, if you don't have any, first of all, there are 2 points. One is, if you don't have anything to say, then don't say anything. And I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about in general, right? Why do people talk when they have nothing to say and nothing compelling to say, nothing to add? They do it because they bought the media in this thing called the upfront. They're like, well, we've got this insertion. We may as well say something. No, shut up. You know, but I think what you had said on that was the companies that had no platform or basis or credibility and had no track record in actually, you know, demonstrating that Black Lives Matter was a movement and a commitment that they'd made to diversity. All they should have said is, we don't know what to say at the moment. We're unsure. So we want you to know that we're listening and we're learning. And when we feel we have something to say that is compelling to add value, we'll say it or we'll let you know. Yeah, and so that's why I said it. And no, I didn't just say it because it was you, but that's why I acknowledge it. But I mean, those are the 2 things. So, you know, when Marshall McLuhan said the medium is the message, there's so many elements to it. There's the medium, is the metric, the message. It's not just as simple as where should we advertise? It's should we advertise? It's why should we advertise? It's what should we say? It's why are we saying it? It's how are we even measuring success? And I think if you approach it, to your point earlier, you were much more succinct than I was, you know, which is this idea of, you know, people are just doing it because they feel they should be doing it. And it takes work. And unfortunately, we're not programmed as important media and marketing and business executives to actually work. We're lazy. And that is why, you know, the 30-second spot always represented on MASH, on Friends, on Seinfeld. You know, I could reach 65 to 80% of households with just one 30-second spot on ABC, CBS, and NBC. The world does not work like that anymore.
I've never said this out loud. I've thought it a bunch of times, and I've always wondered if it would get me in trouble. But I'm just gonna throw it out here. I wonder if we're in a point now where brands, like, and you know, it's so funny. And one of the questions I had for you is, you know, like, do corporations need to have an opinion on every movement, and do they need to act like people? And I'll get to that in a second. But we're at a point now where brands almost are expected to have an opinion on everything, and it's going to keep going down the list. So right now it's International Women's Day, and it's Black Lives Matter, and it's all these really important issues. But where does it stop? Like, does a brand need to have an opinion on National Secretary's Day? Does a brand need to have an opinion on National Ice Cream Day? Because eventually it's going to be like, why are we looking at brands at all for these things? Like, I don't care what Bic Pen thinks about, you know, almost anything, but I use them and they're great. You know, it's like I have a thermos full of hot tea in front of me. I've never thought for a second what that brand thinks of me. So there are brands that I care about, that I do want them to be good global citizens and things like that. But it's almost to the point where people were saying, you know, oh, this company hasn't commented. Well, it's like as long as they're not doing anything to hinder the Black Lives movement, or they're not doing anything like, I wonder, why do we even expect brands to stand up? Like, so Nike's one of my favorite brands in the world, and they were very, you know, they had a very strong opinion right out of the gate, because, you know, like I mentioned before, there are brands who have had a history of, I don't want to use the word protest, but brands of having a history of having a strong opinion and backing up their opinion with actions. So Ben & Jerry's, maybe the greatest response to Black Lives Matter I ever saw, and it worked out for them. When you talk about free, you know, it spawned, you know, 50 or 60 different memes where they're just like, you know, it's like, we're Ben & Jerry's, fuck the police, our next ice cream is called, you know, something blueberry, or something like but it's so interesting that, like, I'd rather, or go on. I'm going to ramble for 10 more minutes. You go.
Didn't they get arrested now, the founders? And thank you, by the way, at the exact moment that you swore, putting on the fact that my mother is watching this.
Well, I swore you didn't. It's okay. I'm sure she knows you hang out with some questionable people. But
I'm sure she watched your episode on, you know, you being interviewed by me. But didn't they get arrested now, the founders?
They've been arrested 3 or 4 times over the last decade. They really stand by their beliefs, like they, you know, for various different things. They're a real interesting, you know, brand and stuff like that. So it's interesting. But, you know, Nike stood up and they donated $40 million. Jordan brand, which a lot of people don't even realize is like run as its own individual company, they donated $100 million.
I want to, this is something that I was thinking the other day, and this is one of those, you know, Saul Colt moments where I'm thinking, should I even say this out loud, and will I get into trouble? You know, this is the effect you have on me. But so when we think about what happened with, you know, obviously post George Floyd, we have Rayshard Brooks and his girlfriend, and I believe I've got this right. I think his girlfriend is white. And I'm just saying, his white girlfriend set fire to the Wendys, right?
Who's this? Sorry.
So Rayshard Brooks got shot in the back. The guy pulled out the taser, the stun gun, and his girlfriend set fire to the Wendys and burnt the whole thing down. And I was thinking to myself, and clearly there's meant to be no opportunism here whatsoever. But what if Wendys turned around and said, we're not going to press charges. We're not going to do that. We're just not going to do that. Not this time. We're fine. We're good. We won't even claim from insurance and drag on another company. We'll rebuild it as well. And I'm not blaming Wendys, because what happened at Wendys, it was a couple of people at Wendys that called the cops. Why? Because someone had fallen asleep in their car in the actual drive-through line. But what if Wendys did that? How unique and different and hopefully authentic would that be, to actually have a company stand up and step up and say, this is how we're going to respond, so even to criminal behavior. In this
my opinion, that's better than making a giant donation and saying, look how great we are. I think that would have been fascinating, and it would have caused a real interesting conversation. Instead, I don't know if you followed the blowback to Wendys, but they got they got some grief from the masses on the internet, because they're like, oh, Wendys, you're so irreverent and cheeky online. How come you haven't said anything funny in 2 days? And they basically said, because there's something funny about our place getting burned down. Like it's almost to the point where you can't please anybody anymore.
But you see, this comes back. I mean, we're like kind of unpacking that conversation that I heard you talking in, because when you guys were responding to a study that actually showed that brands that didn't talk, that were silent, actually declined or didn't do as well as brands that did. And I know that, for example, Samuel Money was cheering that. I disagree with him.
I do too, and I think it's way too early to have any results from it.
He's a brand guy, right? So he wants the brands to talk. But I think really what happened is, when you're in, there are 2 points. One is, when you're in the business of blabbering, today is National Handshake Day, by the way. So we can shake like this. Can you shake with me virtually? We can do that.
I can't wait to see what Wendys has to say about National Handshake Day.
So there's one thing, which is when we constantly, it's part of our content strategy, and there's a power failure during the Super Bowl, and Oreo says you can dunk in the dark, and that's, and the stakes are low, and it's very superficial. And brands like to blabber, and they blabbered, we're all in this together, and we got your back, and these unprecedented times. But suddenly when Black Lives Matter hits, cat's got your tongue. And so part of the problem, like with Wendys, is when you're in the business of blabbering, just because you're building brand and trying to sell and hawk your $1 menu, suddenly when people are looking to you saying, now what do you have to say? It's like, well, we just really are just, responding to National Parchment Day, which was yesterday. But so that's the one point, right? Which is, I think, exactly to your point. But the second is, there has to be, I think, some consistency. But more importantly, let's remember, a brand is nothing. It's meaningless. It's just, it's hocus pocus. It's a mirror image. It's a hall of mirrors. It's a distortion. It's really the company. It is a symbol or a visualization of the company and the people in the company. And so what we want to hear from, and what we need to hear from, are the people in the company, the people's voices, the people's collective voices. That means your employees. It means your minimum wage workers. It means everyone in your company. And that's where they fall down, because suddenly, at Oreo or at, Coca-Cola, whatever the hell their Twitter handles are, what we realize is that's ephemeral. It's intangible. It's not real. And what we need is a link that says, here is a link to our people talking about this, to our point of view, the humanization of issues. That is what we need.
My favorite response to internet outrage is as a stand-up comedian, Neal Brennan, who co-created the Chappelle Show. He some people attacked him online about something, and I don't even remember what it was about. It was nothing too gratuitous, like with Chris D'Elia and the other things that are going on now. But his response was so great, and I wonder if a brand could get away with doing this. He looked the reporter right in the eyes and said, "Hit me up in 30 days and let's see if this is still important." And that was his response to the whole thing. And I wonder if, like, a lot of this internet outrage that people go through today, if a brand actually said, "Let's see if you still care next week." Obviously a brand couldn't, or at least it would take a very special kind of brand to say that. But you know, I've said this many times before, and I'm going on a tangent, but I would not have the career I have today if it wasn't for social media. Who knows if it's a career or not, but you know, that's up for you know, perception. But man, social media isn't as fun as it used to be. You know, it used to actually be a place where you could share interesting ideas and meet people. Like, I wouldn't know you if it wasn't for social media. I'd say probably most of the people that I care about, I've met in the last decade, you know, either have met many times in person at a conference or something, but the initial spark or the continuation of the relationship happened through social media. But now it's just, it's so angry and like entitled. And that's not like a comment on young people, old people, or anything like that. It's just, you know, we used to talk in the early days about this is leveling the playing field between giving a voice to small brands, and it amplifies it. But now it's just really amplified, like the worst in a lot of situations and conversations. And like, I kind of feel bad for brands, and to a certain extent, because like, you're never on the right side of history. It's a weird time.
Well, you know, I actually commented on that. So I, as you will know, and as people may not know, that I do like a little what I call a seated soliloquy at the start of every show, which is my point of view on what's going on, or something connected, you know, to my guest. I think for you, I spoke about experience and the power of experience, and I do think we're actually witnessing maybe the second coming of this idea of leveling the playing fields. And it actually came from an insight from one of my guests, Richard Owen. And he basically said, you, Joe, and quite frankly, you, Saul, and you, Laura, and you, Chris Brogan, and, you know, your production quality is rising every single day. And all of these mainstream late night hosts and brands, you know, they've kind of regressed into, as he called it, Wayne's World, and struggled. And what's happening now is it's a different kind of leveling of the playing fields, but it's not a David versus Goliath. It's a kind of like equalization that's happening. And there's another insight that's kind of buried in there, which is when these guys go back to normal. I mean, I'll tell you, like, slight tangent to the tangent, but I've been really amazed that SNL can't put out a show every week. I think they've just given up. They just can't figure out how to do it. But when we go back to the old way with laugh tracks and live studio audiences and makeup and will people even care anymore about the artificial, the contrived, the propped up, in a sense? So I do think, I mean, you know, Jay Bear said the other day, I caught the tail end on he was on Chris Brogan. You see, like, we're all like kind of like connected. And he basically said, today, you know, we're all startups, from the largest of the large to the smallest of the small, you know, and so it's almost like a day one for all of us. That's a good thing. Now, the social media thing that you're talking about, it has been a problem, and I think the biggest problem right now is, you know, it's the two T words. It's trust and truth, and I think we really are struggling as humanity to figure out what's real and what isn't. You know, the other day, so I'll give you just an anecdote. You know, someone sent to me, someone who I would consider to be, you know, pretty right, on the right wing, I should say, pretty conservative, and they sent a video to me of a young black man in his car who created a video, put it online. It went viral, basically, lambasting and criticizing the people that were marching and specifically, rioting and looting. Now, let's for a second, I think everybody agrees on both sides that vandalism and criminal behavior and looting and destruction of property is not necessarily a good thing. But they sent it to me because that reinforced their worldview. Look, a black person attacking black people, this shows you that they're wrong. And I said, please don't send me this anymore, because this is not moving the conversation forward. It's just reinforcing your worldview. Would you like me now to find you a video of a white person or defending it? So that's me. That's the equivalent. Me sending them a video of a white person defending the looting and the rioting and the vandalism. It's frustrating now for people like you and I, because our careers have also been built through this. But I think our goal now, we have a responsibility to resume to the this idea of the rising tide floats all boats. Even though there are people dragging us down, we have to break free of the quicksand and rise up, and be able to continue to show people the positivity, right? The hope, the game-changing, the life-changing aspect, of social media. Now, I'll say one more thing. Every now and then I see someone goes to Facebook and they go, I'm really struggling right now, or say something nice. Someone said that the other day. Someone say something nice, and I just said, you're loved. You are loved. And someone the other day said, I'm really struggling right now. And I said, how can I help? We need more of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So I want to go back to a question we had, and then I haven't even really talked about your book. We are going to, I promise, because I'm curious. But Wendy, another regular guest on the Beancast, dear friend, she says, what do you beauties, she's talking about us as plural, think about the brands pulling off of Facebook? Any thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, which brands have actually pulled out? Have brands pulled out?
I've seen, to be completely honest, this isn't a topic that I'm super interested in, so I've only read the headlines. For the most part, it seems like there's a lot of outdoor retail brands. I think, I could be wrong. I
can research it. Maybe Wendy, if you want to just do a quick. Okay, thank you. So North Face, North Face. So my response to you would have been, you often hear overtures from P&G. They're very big in talking, but not necessarily walking their talk or following through. Unilever is a company that I think has been a little bit more activist in terms of making threats, and I'm not sure to what degree they followed through, but I know they have certainly spoken about pulling out. Good for North Face, but and there are companies like, I would imagine probably wouldn't be a stretch if Patagonia was in that same category, and maybe a Ben & Jerry's. Again, companies that have track records of fighting for justice, racial justice, etc. But I think this is a tough one, and it's I'll draw a little parallel for you, Wendy, which is in the agency world, a world that I used to work in and a world that I'm connected to as a marketer. There are a lot of brands that behave incredibly poorly with respect to RFPs and pitches, where they make agencies jump through hoops, spend a lot of money, and then they say, even if we don't hire you, we own your ideas. There are companies that have ridiculous payment terms, like 180 days. And so if every agency was to basically draw a line and say, no more, we're not going to play by your flawed and abusive rules, well, that would affect change. But the problem is there's always one agency just a little bit more desperate than the others that breaks the line, that doesn't hold the line. And so you don't want to be the brand that pulls out, that does takes the moral high road, and now you're losing out on all of that, on all of those leads, all of that, those clicks or signups, etc. But for sure, you know, if one big brand does it and another one follows suit and another one follows suit, you're going to see very, very quick capitulation. As I heard Scott Galloway, sorry, Professor Galloway. Yeah, see, you know, Patagonia, there you go. Scott Galloway was talking with Kara Swisher on their podcast about the whole issue with Facebook, you know, the call that Zuckerberg made to Donald Trump and the idea of not labeling posts, etc. And she had made the case, Kara, about First Amendment. And Scott said, I disagree. This is not about First Amendment. It's about Second Gulf Stream. It's all about the money. And you know, money talks and bullshit walks.
We're not saving lives, we're saving lifestyles. It's you know, it goes to the whole thing. Hey, let's talk about this book finally. I want to talk about it because I did my research. This is going to be the first 6-hour show, by the way. So I hope your calendar's clear.
Hold on, just remember I have a show at 2.
Okay, well, I'll make sure you're there.
Should we just go straight into it? We'll just go straight into it. We'll bring Andrew Keene on, you know, who's great. I mean, because he wrote The Cult of the Amateur and the internet is not the answer. You know, so we'll just bring him straight on. He'll love it.
So in your newest book, Built to Suck, you talk about how company size is something that used to be like a badge of honor, and now it's really almost like the anchor that's keeping a lot of brands down. It's more negative than positive. I have an opinion on this. I want to hear yours first, obviously, but I want to seed your answer, or at least inspire your answer with a little thing. I worked for a client who I always, like, the number one thing we butted heads about was they always thought that the metric of success was headcount. And I always said, well, wouldn't you rather have 100 people instead of 300 people, but those 100 people worked like 300 people? And they really always just beat me up on this. But, you know, talk a little bit about like company size, because it used to be the thing that was the deem of success.
So I'll try and say this as succinctly as I can. The origins of the book, obviously, Jim Collins wrote Built to Last. I wrote Built to Suck. Jay Scheidt, who was the founder of TVWA Scheidt Day, said, let's see how big we get before we suck, before we go bad. And the premise is that, you know, size used to be a growth enabler. The whole, you know, from the Industrial Revolution forward, the very nature of business was about size, scale, economies of scale, efficiencies of scale, being a global, you know, blue chip company, and having these networks and these efficiencies and synergies of these networks. Well, size is now a growth inhibitor. It's suffocating the corporation because companies have become too big, too siloed, too political, too dysfunctional, too conservative, and too risk averse. And essentially what's happening is they're slowing down when the world is speeding up. So I actually, you know, in keeping with the cover of the book, this corporate apocalypse, I came up with the 4 horsemen of the corporate apocalypse, which is size, age, being a public company, and culture. And the reality is this kiss of death, which is, you know, as I say, the business model of big business is broken. So it's very hard now to keep growing, because what is the book really about at the end of the day, Saul? It's about growth. You're either growing or you're stagnating. And if you're stagnating, you're dying. And by the way, growth doesn't always mean growing out. It means growing up, you know, and being able to make tougher choices and decisions and compromises. And that's why, and there isn't an industry, you know, I touch on WeWork in a good way, but I also say no company's immune, not even WeWork. And I talk about Hertz in the book. And I say, for the life of me, I do not understand why the car rental business still or even exists. I just don't get it. And we've seen them file for bankruptcy as well. So this isn't, again, me taking joy. It's just me saying, you know, I came up with another statement post-book as well, which said companies, it's actually what I call a heresy, because I came up, maybe the thing I'm proudest of in this book is this whole platform called Heresy. But I actually said companies should have term limits. And after which, or at that term limit, they should either be, let me see if I remember this, they should either be dissolved, dissected, or disrupted. So dissolved means bye-bye, thanks for playing, let's try again. You know, dissected is broken up, or disrupted, which is some kind of pivot or transformation. And I really do believe that.
Yeah. So, you know, you mentioned that large companies struggle with change and you know, risk and all these things. Is it, you know, is it just because they're so big and it takes a long time to move a ship? Is it because, you know, the senior executives are making a ton of money and they know that they may not fall into another position so easy? Like why do large companies struggle with these things?
Yeah, well, I mean, change is there, you know, we could probably spend an entire hour just talking about change itself. On one hand, I always go back to the saying, which is change happens when the pain of not changing is greater than the pain of changing. Companies are not recognizing, they're also not selling change through smartly. You know, so it's always about old is bad, good is new, or talking about pleasure. The only pleasure should come from pain, which basically means you're a masochist, which means you're an entrepreneur. So it's all kind of interconnected. But change, you know, as Darwin said, right, it's not the strongest of species that survives, nor the most intelligent, but rather the one that is the most adaptable to change. Change is the only way to survive and thrive. And one of the things I actually developed in this book was what I call the survival instinct. The survival instinct is based on two things: self-preservation, which is don't kill me. I just want to stay in the game, and adaptation, which is I'm going to kill you in order to survive, in order to adapt and evolve. And I think the problem with change is, as human beings, first of all, we're programmed to resist change. And then because of all of this fear and all of this, I would say, narrow-mindedness and insecurity and paranoia and all of the politics of corporate of the corporation, what's really happened is this idea of let me just get to retirement. You know, I mean, Rashad Tabakawala, one of my mentors, he came out maybe 10 years ago and he said, we need these people to die. We need this old guard to die. They need to die of old age and move on. And that was pretty, you know, out there. I noticed something interesting happen, which is I've noticed that the new guard that fills their place, it's not about age. It's about a mentality. They fall into the same traps. Why? Because of their power. Because of, you know, absolute power corrupts absolutely. Because once they've got this budget and this authority, they don't want to lose it. And letting go and risking losing it comes from being vulnerable. And so every aspect of this is just programmed to destroy the company from the inside out. I'll say one other thing, which is I talk about it in the book. If you want to sell through change, you have to do it in 4 directions. Most people just talk about it one way. So clearly there's top down, right? Sell through. How do we sell through to senior management is the #1 question I get asked. But you also have to sell it through bottom up, from the ground, the grassroots, the rock face. You have to sell it through outside in. That means bringing in intelligent, independent, objective outsiders, experts, subject matter experts like Saul Colt over there, for example. And then the final one, which I believe is the hardest one, is inside out, which is the rot of middle management. If you can't figure out how to effect change from the middle, from that rotten core, it will eat you from the inside out. It will eat you alive. So nobody said this was going to be easy, but we have to stop oversimplifying all of the stuff, realizing it's hard, it's complex, it's going to require work, but it will be worth it if we are committed, to survival and thrival and growth and evolution and staying in business.
So I want to call back to a couple of things that you mentioned. One, you said Jay Baer said we're all startups right now, and you said that change, happens when the pain is greater than not changing. those are really interesting. It made me sort of wonder, like, are cool and hip startups kind of the answer to what's going on right now? Because if you look, you know, before COVID, everybody was talking about we're in a bubble, it's going to burst and blah, blah, blah. And then COVID happened. And one of the things that happened, you know, we talk about big companies having to, you know, stumble through digital transformation. A lot of these cool hip startups, you know, I'm generalizing, they found out that the VCs, their reaction to COVID was, well, we're just closing the wallet. So a lot of these companies had to become a real business almost overnight. The idea of look at our engagement metrics and with no revenue and things became like, you know, very Web 2.0, if you want to, you know, use an old expression. So, you know, I hate the term pivot, but, you know, it's like nobody's been sort of nobody hasn't had to really take a deep look at their business right now and do some soul searching and figure out, you know, not only how do I get through COVID, but how do I get through 2021?
I mean, it's there's a lot that, you know, there's a lot to unpack there, Mr. Colt. Where would you like me to start?
I'm the master of asking 8 things without letting the guest answer. Start anywhere. It's just like I think it's really interesting that you know, a lot of big companies look to startups as inspiration, but they also but they never actually follow through with anything. Yeah.
So thank you for giving me that place to start, because there were a few ways to go. I came up with this. I found this this visualization, and I could try something very different, but it would probably backfire, which was take control of your screen. Do you know that a guest can do that, by the way?
No.
Yeah, they can. So I could literally share my screen with you right now, but it would probably backfire because I'm actually in the. Hold on, let me try something. I'm going to just try something different. Hang on. Talk amongst yourselves. I'll give you a topic. Rhode Island is neither a road nor an island. Discuss. Okay, watch this. Watch this, Saul.
I am watching.
So this can only backfire, by the way. We're going to go to, let's see. Okay, so you should, is this working? Are you seeing olive oil vinegar holder?
Yes. Well, I put it up on the screen. It wasn't just for me, was it?
No, it's for everyone. But now I've got to figure out how to get back. Okay. But it looks, no, but by you putting it on the screen, now take it off. So before, I see. So you still have to put it on. But when I shared my screen, anyway, it's weird because it was like, I told you it would backfire a little bit. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. If it was a different browser, it would have worked better, or a PowerPoint slide. So that idea of oil, you know, of balsamic vinegar and olive oil, they don't mix. And they do make some nice shapes. You know, when you take the olive oil and you drop the balsamic into it and makes these beautiful little pools, you know, within, you know, like mercury, etc. But I think that to me was like this very like clear crystallization that startup mentality and corporate mentality do not mix and may never mix. And it's probably one of the reasons why, you know, GE was one of the companies, and I write about this in Built to Suck, that really pushed for the whole lean startup mentality, and it didn't work. In fact, it failed within that company, and other companies tried. So a lot of corporations, what they've done is they've bought the startup, the small startup, and then they destroy or they bastardize the startup, or they try maybe and elevate one member of the startup, you know, the founder, to become the chief digital officer. That's actually the only good application, the acqui-hire, so to speak. But I think what corporations haven't realized is that what you need is that holder. What you need is that beautiful holder that where you can see the one living inside the other with the different pipings, the different directions. And like a conductor or an orchestra, the art is knowing when to apply the olive oil and when to apply the balsamic vinegar, and when to mix them and how to mix them and in which quantities. And I think, you know, something that I actually talk about in Built to Suck, which, by the way, I was always told never ever say, and I write about this in the book, but I did, you know, that the executive versus the entrepreneurial way of thinking. There's a brilliant paper that I cite, and it's causal versus effectual. I think it's called causal versus effectual reasoning. It's convergent versus divergent thinking. There are two different types of thinking. Now, we can teach and train one to the other. We can find a happy medium or a bridge. That's part of training and development. But I think the first step in terms of what do we do and how do we cope and how do we survive and make it to 2021 beyond is this idea of, and I will always come down to the same thing, balance, equilibrium, find the right mix, and versus all. If we live on the extremes, on the fringe, on the edge, we will likely fall off.
That's fascinating. So one of the things with, actually, I'm going to skip that. What do you think businesses are going to look like in 2021? Like I'd say, you know, the first 6 months of this year, and obviously we have no idea what the next 6 months are going to be. But it's been probably the strangest year of business ever. Like, you know, dealing with a pandemic that's literally like it's funny. I'm going to go on a tangent now. It's funny. I actually saw somebody bill themselves as a pandemic consultant. And like, if there was ever a piece of bullshit, that's it right there. Because how can you be an expert at something that, you know, happens once every 25 years? But, you know,
isn't that called an epidemiologist?
Yeah, probably.
But this is a marketer, right?
Yeah, business pandemic consultant. But like, how can you even prepare right now? Like, it's so like, you know, I don't know if there's no playbook, but I don't even know if there is the loose blueprint to work from.
So if I may direct your audience to a text message, if you text the word Corona TV to 66866, I sound like Joe Biden now. If you visit my website 668. If you text Corona TV to 66866, you will be signed up to my newsletter, and I will make sure that I send you. Now, there's a reason. A couple of articles and actually a webinar that I gave, which I recorded, called "Preparing for the Next Crisis." Yes, the next one. So the answer to your question, you see, there's value and utility in that call to action, Saul. The point is. And my assertion is we could have, look, I am not a business pandemic expert, but I do know a thing or two about disruption. And I'm sure you saw it, Saul. There's this amazing like little meme or whatever that went around that actually shows all the crises from Y to K, like through Ebola and, you know, bird flu and swine flu and North Korea, and, you know, and it just shows you that Corona or COVID-19 is maybe the 15th or 16th or 17th in that series. So if we've learned anything, it is that the only constant is change. And I think the point is that you know, as I said, we could have, you know, we should have been aware of this or planned for this, maybe not by name, but certainly in terms of intent, in terms of force that disrupts, that disintermediates, that, you know, disintegrates all of our sacred cows or barriers to exit or entry from a competitive standpoint, and that is the kind of agility that we have to now build. I call it survival planning. You know, that's why I created the survival planning canvas. And one of the things I actually said, and I wish, you know, companies would do this, because it's so obvious, and you don't need me. You don't need to hire this business pandemic expert for it, right? Which is, if we, the third horseman is being a public company. So, and that horseman is coming for you. So if we are being held to quarterly earnings and this constant groundhoggian, you know, every 3 months having to show the short-term ROI, well, then our planning should mirror that. So strategic planning should be done quarterly, not annually. I believe just that change alone could create a significantly different organization in terms of how they move, how they adjust, how they course correct, how they contingency plan, and how they figure out how to adapt in these uncertain and unprecedented times.
So, get ready. You said you don't like compliments. You're getting used to them, or they're new to you. I listened to your show when you talked with Chris Brogan. Chris is a dear friend of mine. I like Chris a whole lot. Bordering on love, Chris. But it's interesting. You guys talked about a post Chris made where he kind of called out people for self-promotion, and I'm paraphrasing and embellishing a little bit, but he kind of said people who self-promote are sad inside, and I don't agree, because I self-promote. It's kind of like, no one's going to do it for me, so it's like I gotta keep talking to myself, but my compliment here with the SMS code and everything, you do this way better than I do.
Yeah, I know why you're laughing. I think I know why you're laughing.
Yes.
Why are you laughing?
You're hijacking the conversation here.
Yeah, so do it.
All right, there we go.
So that's me with a green screen. Isn't that cool?
Yes.
Sorry, just using the phone. Sorry, carry on.
Yeah.
We're talking about self-promotion.
Yeah, no, I think you do it masterfully, and No,
I don't agree at all. I mean, I think I suck at it, and I think that I think there are some people that do it really, really well. And I wish I could be better at it. I want to tell you, there were a couple of things about the Chris thing, which I loved about his post, because I think it had the right impact or effect. Like, everyone felt like it was almost like, we're being exposed for being communists. So, like, I hope that's not me. And he was like, you're safe. You're safe. You can go back. We're not coming for you. But then he also said one of his don'ts was he wants to stop being angry or snarky, etc. And I said, well, how do you reconcile the two? And he said, well, I'm not perfect. I'm a work in progress as well. So I think the first point, and I think it's a key point, which is we deserve to earn a living. We deserve to be able to put food on the table, maintain our mortgages. Most of us have, especially as freelancers, consultants, have had our revenue decimated. Anyone who's a public speaker or keynote speaker has had their revenue decimated. I am a public speaker and a keynote speaker. There are no physical events going on. There are a lot of people out there that are saying we're killing it virtually right now. We're doing hundreds of these virtual keynotes. I don't know that that's actually the case. I take their word for it, but I think that there are a lot of people that are maybe trying to create a situation that is better than it is. I prefer to be a little bit more honest and transparent and say, hey, listen, look to your left and look to your right. We're all struggling right now and figuring out. So you have the right to earn a living, and you have the right, and anybody that says you don't has absolutely no basis to say that, and they're completely out of line. And it is unacceptable to be accused of doing that. But how I reconcile it, Saul, is I mean, listen, anybody that is streaming right now, a streamie, anybody that is putting out these shows on a daily basis, they should have so much goodwill in their tank right now in terms of what they've given and contributed, and I mean, they should be able to self-promote until the cows come home. And so this is very, very simple. I use the quote sometimes from the Beatles, right? And in the end, the love you take is equal to the love you make. I think I got that right. And I think that's got to be, some people say helping is the new selling. I'm trying to better myself and be more like that, as opposed to, as opposed to the other. But at the same time, judging others, is, don't judge somebody else until you've looked in the mirror.
Yeah, I don't mind people self-promoting. My whole thing is, if you're adding value, that's fine. Like I draw the line when you make a quote about yourself and you attribute it to yourself and you put it like next to a headshot and you tweet that out yourself. But if, like, you and I are talking and I've gotten a bunch of Twitter notifications saying people are grabbing our conversation and live streaming it, live tweeting it to a certain extent, I'm going to retweet all that stuff because it's value. I think there's a real difference between look at my watch, look at my car, look at my house, than, providing a webinar and an interview and bringing interesting people on and having thoughtful conversations. So I do agree that a lot of it is for validation, but like, big deal. It's, deal with it. If you're not giving me money, you don't have a say in it. But hey, one more question, and then I give you your day back. And then you're going to get to promote yourself till the ends of time. Are you a fan of capitalism?
Well, so I've been on this mission that, and I've written, I write about it. I call it corporate citizenship. It's there are 4 growth pillars in Built to Suck, which are digital disruption, which is not what's happening right now, customer obsession, talent resurrection, and corporate citizenship. And the essence behind that is this idea that says, if you want to do good, you have to be good. And it's a massive rethink on purpose and corporate social responsibility and all that, a lot of that crap out there. But one thing I talk about is capitalism needs to evolve, right? Not devolve, and I've said the idea of, democratic socialism. Sorry, Bob, Bernie was right. He just branded it wrong. He branded it poorly, because socialism is not a good word, but capitalism needs to evolve. Evolution. I mean, aren't we talking about corporations evolving and change? Andrew Keene, who is on my show in an hour and 39 minutes, is on the capitalism needs to evolve bandwagon, which upsets me greatly because I love disagreeing with him and he loves disagreeing with me. And whether it's Philip Kotler or Ray Dalio or Mark Bertolini or John Mackey, just the list of people that are coming out with the same statement, the Business Roundtable, capitalism needs to evolve. The discrepancies, I mean, I'll tell you a quick anecdote. I think Abigail Disney, one of the Disney heiresses, came out and criticized, I think it's Iger, who's no longer, I think, if I got it right, the chairman of Disney.
He's still the chairman. He was the CEO.
He stepped down? Okay.
But he's come back to help during COVID. All
right. So she criticized him. Why? Because he took home, I'll get the numbers slightly wrong, like $150 million bonus. And she worked out that he could personally, from that bonus, give every single employee at the Disney parks, every single employee, a 15% pay rise, a 15% bonus from that bonus, from his bonus, and still walk out with $34 million. And that tells you that there's something wrong with pay structures. And I don't care anybody that wants to come to me and tell me he got there fair and square and he deserves it and he got his MBA and he got this and he got that. It is just a discrepancy, a chasm that is unacceptable and must be narrowed and crossed and repaired. And so where does capitalism fit in all of that? I mean, we have seen, when I said Bernie was right, we have seen how when the shit hits the fan, you know, government has to help its people big time, whether it's, I mean, I still haven't seen any PPP, you know, I think I got rejected. But whether it's helping businesses, whether it's healthcare, whether it's paying for tests, you know, when times are tough and when the chips are down, what we realize is this idea of the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. It doesn't work. It's one of those business, as I said, the business model of big business is broken. The business model of capitalism is broken and needs to evolve. And you can take that tweet, that soundbite, and you can promote it until the cows come home, and you can even put your name next to it if you want. That is the message we need to get out there.
Hi, Joe. This has been a delight. I will say that, you know, the time we spent between your show and my show, it's probably the most time we spent together, but I've enjoyed every minute of it. This has been really very cool. I appreciate it. Please.
Please what?
Well, I was going to say, promote yourself. Tell people where they can buy your book, where they can, you know, hire you as a consultant, where they can get more information, give them more, you know, text codes. This is your spot.
I don't really want to do any of that, but what I want to do is to say, you know, what's so amazing that's come out of this pandemic is not only is it the most time we've ever spent together, but we also, I don't actually think we've ever met. We haven't really met or spent time in real life together. Yeah, no, but
we chatted once at South by Southwest, like, but very
okay. But here's my point. My point is the next time we are together in real life, you can be sure that we're going to actually just sit down and want to spend time with one another and hang out. And that is one of the gifts of this pandemic. As a business pandemic expert, or what I call a PDE, I'm an SVP of PDEs. That has been a good thing. I will say, you know, I have a small consultancy called the HMS Beagle, which is the HMSBeagle.com. And most importantly, I just, you know, if you like this message and if you like these conversations, coronaTV.show is the home of Corona TV, which will eventually become JaffeJuice.tv. And the best thing I could ask you to do is subscribe to the show on my YouTube channel, and come and hang out with me during the show, during the after show from time to time, because it's really been very meaningful and I think valuable conversation with smart people like Saul.
Yeah, I agree. It's been really great. Joe, I can't thank you enough. And like, again, I'll do it one more time. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for the opportunity.